I'd like to thank Tyler and Nancy for getting me involved with this. My interest in early detection of cancer comes from a personal story, which I thought I'd share with you, and then a follow-up to that, which I found extremely distressing and disappointing. In 2007, having been in almost perfect health except for a back problem for all of my life, I noticed that when I urinated, I had a slight tingling after urinating that I'd never had before. And being a physician scientist, of course, I worried about what was causing that, but decided it was probably nothing and waited a couple of months before deciding that I really should tell my primary care physician about it. I did that and went in for a routine annual exam, and he, in addition to the usual things he did a urinalysis. And he found a few red cells in my urine without any other abnormalities. He said, lots of people have a few red cells, nothing to worry about. Come back in a month and we'll check it again. So I came back in a month, he checked it again, and I have saved the email note he sent me after he got the results from the second test. He said, this is as clean as it ever gets. You have nothing to worry about. If you want to come back for a third check in a month, you can do that. But if you don't, just forget about it. Being a compulsive scientist and a physician, I was not totally satisfied with that and began to test my own urine with over-the-counter urinary test tape, which allows you to look for occasional red cells by a color change, green dots on a yellow background. And almost every time I tested my urine, I found one or two green dots. I did this for a period of a few weeks. And one day, because I do have a chronic back problem and it was bothering me, I took a healthy dose of over-the-counter ibuprofen, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, which inhibits both forms of enzymes called cyclooxygenases, which produce prostaglandins and cause inflammation in various pathogenic situations. When you inhibit one of these two enzymes, cyclooxygenase 1, which is contained in platelets, which help plug up wounds if they occur, you make the platelets less sticky. And by total chance, I tested my urine for red cells as I went to the bathroom a few hours later. And instead of a few dots on the end of the test tape, the yellow strip turned bright green, which meant there were multiple red cells in the urine and that I had submicroscopic bleeding. I acted on that, obviously, and ended up being diagnosed at the Mass General with an extremely early transitional cell bladder tumor, which fortunately had not invaded my bladder wall. I was operated on a few days later and have been followed for 8.5 years with no recurrence and have been declared cured of the problem, and learned a lot about bladder cancer, both from my urologist and from Dr. Vogelstein, whom I called to learn something more about bladder cancer at the time. And so I feel extremely fortunate that because of the scientific and medical background I had, I did not ignore a ephemeral, very minor symptom and could follow it in a sense myself. The most disappointing, so that has clearly gotten me interested in the field of early detection, which we will talk about later. I decided I would try to contribute to the field as a donor about 1.5 years ago and approached the urology department and a molecular biologist at the Broad Institute about providing for them pilot funding to do some kind of clinical trial with molecular markers based upon what was known about the mutations that occur in bladder cancer and what you could detect in the urine, to see if a molecular test for early diagnosis could be developed, not necessarily initially in a person like myself who had never had bladder cancer, but in a clinical setting which wouldn't require quite as large a trial and was a more rational design and a simpler design. Got significant help from Dan Haber at the MGH in designing that. Hosted a conference call with the molecular people and urologists at the MGH who would conduct that trial and said to them, okay, this is great design, very exciting. Provide me with a 2-page simple write-up and I will write you a check for $250,000 for a pilot to get this field off the ground. Do you think I ever got even a paragraph back from the group? That's why I'm here today. I did not. And I find that disappointing, and I'll spare stronger words for the moment until later. I think that early detection and prevention, which we are going to be talking about today, is a really underserved area of cancer research. The technologies that are available in biomedicine broadly today dwarf what were available when people like Tyler and Nancy and I began our interest in trying to unravel the molecular basis for cancer. We went into that field because we were excited that there were approaches and tools that would teach us what the molecular basis for cancer is, and the hope that we could then stimulate a field to do something in the treatment of cancer that otherwise would not have been thinkable. And I think that effort by many people, starting in the early 70s and late 60s, did turn out to be successful. The genome sequencing that has been in the limelight for cancer for the last several years, which is both productive and controversial in some settings, I think its largest impact, in my opinion, is not simply defining the mutations in genes and therefore providing new targets for the development of so-called targeted therapy, but they have taught us another way of looking at what Nancy showed in the classic epidemiology trials. They've taught us the nature of the mutations that are behind at least 2 or 3 of the cancers that are prevalent. The mutational spectrum in lung cancer, in melanoma, are distinct for each of those 2 tumors and have taught us how the external environment, smoking and sun exposure, lead to the cancers that people then suffer from. So I think that the challenge is to turn the thought process and the technologies that now exist in science, which are just wondrous compared to when Tyler and Nancy and I and Doug began our research, in a new direction, not arguing at all, would never argue to stop doing research toward better therapies. But I think we can have an even bigger impact if we turn our attention to doing something about early detection and prevention than simply focusing on the stream of new targeted therapies. Thank you very much. Look forward to the symposium.